How are you adapting the office to make sure that you've got this hybrid approach and, it's not beanbag? What are the hot stuff that you guys are talking about?
It's definitely underbedded by technology, definitely. So, I'm not here to sell ServiceNow or anything like that, but, any kind of company at the moment needs to solve the collaboration problem. How do you get people together in an easy manner that they can kind of book their day? Yes, is kind of what we look at. So how do we, articulate and make sure that the technology works?
On this pod, we're trying to achieve two main things. Number one, what we'd like to do is provide you with really valuable information from really experienced experts within the field of workplace technology and the future workplace. So they're the guests that we're trying to bring onto this. The second thing we want to do is we want to make sure that this pod is completely free. For that, we need a little bit of help. So, in order to ensure that we can bring you the highest quality content, the highest quality guests, all I need you to do, subscribe to our channel and like this video. That helps drive our audiences, which helps give us better content, which gives us better guests, and everybody wins. Okay? So like and subscribe.
Who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, so Lewis Barker, work for ServiceNow, who are an enterprise software company. And my role is pretty multifaceted with ServiceNow. So I've been there 7.5 years. So most of my job is workplace services, and I oversee our EMEA region, kind of acting as the business liaison. And so understanding kind of where the business is going, translate that back into our workplace team, whether that be the real estate strategy portion, kind of understanding projects, what does the business want within them. And then another portion is workplace technology. So ServiceNow is unique, let's say, in the workplace world in terms of it has its own workplace offering. So I work with our own product team to kind of understand their roadmap, where are they going, kind of talk as the end user, help them kind of drive the product in the right way, and also talk to other ServiceNow customers around how we use that internally. And then another piece is kind of transformation innovation. So anything operational excellence, change management, kind of looking at how that future workplace piece looks and then try and push the boundaries where we can. So I've kind of added bits and pieces as I've kind of gone through that 7.5 years.
It's mega diverse as well. 7.5 years in. Carnage. How did you into it?
Yeah. Very, probably like every workplace person, doesn't it? The classic, just fell into it.
Yeah, listen, I woke up one day and I was 7.
Yeah, no, not really fell into it. Like my dad was in workplace and real estate, so I kind of worked for him for a year. And at the end of it was after university. I did geography there, so kind of like probably many other geography students. Yeah, what do I do when I need to cross over to a workplace? Exactly, makes perfect sense. Cross-functional.
So yeah, well, you did say you look after EMEA, so maybe you've got a knowledge where
Locations are awful though. Not very good at that. And so yeah, just saw what he did and kind of decided let's give that a go. So kind of fell into it in a non-for-profit in London. Kind of did a couple of things for them and then moved over to ISG and kind of looking after their real estate, and then made quite a conscious decision at that point. I wanted to get into the technology sector, and luckily ServiceNow came knocking on my door at that point, and the rest is history with kind of ServiceNow. So really fell into it, but just loved the people and the dynamicness, kind of as I said in my start, just taking on different things and kind of driving them. But really, it's always about the people for me.
Yeah. Well, if you're acting as the end user, then it has to be about the people.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, that's the deployment that you're pushing out, and they're the guys that are being affected by it.
Yeah, massively. And I think it's even more important now with kind of how the workplace is being treated and kind of how people are using it, that we really need to understand the people.
Yeah. And how are you doing that?
Mostly is to do with interacting with them, right? So like I said, I spend most of my time talking to the business about where you're going, what are you doing? And it's not like, what are you using in the workplace? That's like, we can answer that because we're pretty well versed in that as an industry, but kind of how do they want to use it? And then articulate that back in. So really it's just a lot of, from a tactical sense, just a lot of meetings, a lot of good relationship building with them. But I think more now than definitely like pre-COVID, and I talked to my team about this, is kind of selling the value of workplace. So when I'm talking to the business, I'm understanding, I'm kind of gleaning information, but I'm also saying, why is it important that you come and use the space? Like, do you know about it? Like, we had loads of new people who came and joined ServiceNow. A lot of them had never set foot in an office. So, what do we have and how can you use it?
Yeah.
So that, that's definitely a large part of what I do and how I interact with them.
Yeah, and we're doing this conversation pop up to me all the time with regards to what the office looks like. And in doing these podcasts, that seems to be the thing that comes around over and over and over again. It's what does the office look like? And outside of beanbags and slides and, foosball tables, where are those conversations leading you? How are you adapting the office to make sure that you've got this hybrid approach and, it's not beanbags? What are the hot stuff that you guys are talking about?
Yeah, it's definitely underbedded by technology, definitely. So, I'm not here to sell ServiceNow or anything like that, but any kind of company at the moment needs to solve the collaboration problem. How do you get people together in an easy manner and that they can kind of book their day? Yes, is kind of what we look at. So how do we, articulate and make sure that the technology works? So kind of from the get goes, and how do you go and book a desk if you need to, book a meeting room, book a car parking space? But even like we're discussing and trying to solve, not that you can all the time, is how do you actually don't even do that?
Right.
Because that is such, I think, a blocker to people. I'd only get up in the morning and book my desk, book my meeting room, book my car parking space, So how do you kind of make sure their day or the type of activity that they do is already planned out and ready for them to go?
Yeah.
So kind of like if someone's holding an offsite, we know through trends or how they use the space, what are those things that they would need. So kind of removing the barriers through technology is a big conversation for us. And I think the second part, which is definitely more like soft, is like community. So I've started to use analogies, not fully baked out, but if you look at all these new trendy running clubs, right, that are building community around their brand, how do you do that but in a workplace setting? So people come to work, but some people come for the community now. The most people that I bump into at the end of the workday,
Yeah.
they're saying, how good was it that I met so-and-so today?
I bumped into X.
I bumped into X, yeah, which is kind of the community. So not that I've got all the answers, but I think the answer does revolve around community.
Does that change based on seniority?
Well, I think the only way it revolves like anything is the community may be different of the type of mixture that you have within it, but there will always be some types of people that may need that, and I get your point around, maybe the senior people have got all their friends. They don't need any more friends.
Yeah.
But I think there's a responsibility on that senior leadership to show up. So if we, at ServiceNow, we don't have a mandate,
Right.
to come to the office. And there's the expectation to come to the office. The only way we see that works is if you do have management buy-in.
Gotcha. Because then your junior members of staff are actually having those water cooler moments with the senior members of staff.
Yeah, but like I'd also say it's the expectation. The expectation is set. Like if you have a mandate, the expectation's clear. I think for a lot of companies, as included, and this is my personal take, if you leave it quote unquote grey, we expect you to come in, but there's no real management buy-in. It's super difficult to try and do that. And us as workplace people, we want to encourage them in because we see the value. But you can't necessarily step over that boundary of saying, get in, So really coming back to the start of why we engage with the business is to show that value. Therefore, they say, yeah, I get it. Let's really drive in the attendance to do these types of things.
Yeah.
So that the management then comes in and they want to come in. And naturally, I think you have a gravity of then the younger people following in. It's not necessarily them saying you should come in, because I don't think that's the right approach.
Yeah, I think you're right. Do one of those do as I say, not as I do scenarios, right? But actually, if you're leading by example and being in, then the younger guys are going to be learning an awful lot from the senior management anyway, because they're in there, and it's driven by a cultural shift of behaviour, rather than a contractual obligation.
I think you see the negative impact of that. And once again, this is all kind of personal. I get businesses will do stuff that they seem fit, right? But I think I've seen it in some of our locations where leaders are more proactive in that approach, and they do get better results. Now, granted, there may be other factors to that, but you see it in the community, you see it in the EVS, you see it in, maybe the sales numbers, you see where they've got better dynamics.
Yeah.
And it's not through mandating, it's that leader shows up and other people kind of follow suit.
Yeah, it completely makes sense. And that is all has to be underpinned by the fact that the rooms, the office has to be functional when you get there.
Yeah.
So, which goes back to your first point around technology requirements need to be right, they need to be stable, etc., etc. And so what's that journey look like for you? So, we've spoken about behavioral change. We're talking about the technology, making sure the technology is right. What does the journey look like for you? Let's say you're taking on a space in Madrid, for example. Talk me through the timeline of your decisions and how you're making those decisions.
Yeah, definitely for like a fixed location, it's like years in advance, normally. About
Yeah.
2-3 years, or at least thinking about it.
And are you consulting with the business at that point to say, tell me what you want to achieve in Madrid?
Yeah, it's more like location strategy, right? To be honest. So we'll say, we'll do all the usual stuff. Where are our customers? Where are our clients? But the business, like, believe it or not too much, because we have the information. And if you kind of go to one leader's opinion, you might be getting yourself in a little hot water sometimes if they leave.
Yeah.
In, say, your month.
You just spent $500,000.
Yeah. So we tend to, it's involvement, but not to the degree of the decision. We say, look, we've taken in these factors, they're sound business decisions. And with ServiceNow, with our larger offices, that tends to be in an established market. We have a lot of markets that we're maybe just out there emerging. They're a bit volatile. We're doing well. We're not doing well. We want to go here, go there. So that's when we'll definitely leverage flex. But we'll really, really engage when we do our bigger fixed locations. And we normally know by that point which location works good.
And from a technology, if we're thinking logistics, project management of budgets, from a technology standpoint, have you developed those standards centrally, which we then deploy across Europe? Is that how that bit works, or is it?
Yeah, but it would be globally.
Okay.
Yeah. It would be globally. So we will have our technology standards, whether that be AV or networks, infrastructure, that will just be taught copy and paste.
How do you? This is the impossible question, but how do you see 5 years in advance when you're deploying a solution which is a standards-based solution that you've already developed, and it was probably developed on an office that's 15 years old? How do you see 5 years in advance to ensure that the standards that you guys have got written are fit for purpose in that specific place 5 years out from now?
Yeah.
I know it's an impossible question,
And I'd kind of flip it by saying that I don't think that's our expectation. We want to build something that has agility in it. Now, obviously, if you're investing in technology, it's a lot of capital, so you kind of want to work with partners who are doing that thinking, and having that thought process. Like, the best example I can think of is our customer briefing centers, because they tend to get the treatment first before the employee space, because that tends to be a normal video conferencing type of solutions. But our customer briefing centers tend to be, the bigger projector screens, the hologram booths, those types of things, right? They are kind of pushing the boundaries a little bit. So I'd say with that, we'd definitely leverage partners. I don't think we're bold enough to say we have the answers all internally, right?
Yeah.
So we're really looking at kind of what are people doing, kind of look out into the market to see the trends there. But there'll be a period of time that we know we have to stick to that technology because of the depreciation and all of that type of stuff. But then we'll have a refresh plan in place that says, that's no longer working, or we need to demo something else, so let's look at that. So I'd say that's how we tend to approach it, because it's constantly evolving. Like you say, it's a hard question to answer.
And you'll know it on a life cycle, so you'll try and start seeing ahead the end of the life cycle of that specific piece of kit, and then figuring out.
So then budget it, yeah. Because I think the lessons learned that we've probably had, definitely within our innovation space, that change tends to happen quicker than the depreciation. Is actually budgeting for it, And even in a large corporate like ServiceNow, we still have to do that. We still have to, because those decisions are so cross-functional. It's like IT, AV, workplace. That's 3 different budgets you've got to kind of align, and we don't sit in the same organization.
Yeah, set expectations on users who are one thing, and it's a minefield to try and get through.
It is.
And you mentioned booking car park spaces. You mentioned someone's route to work and their journey throughout work on that particular day.
Yeah.
That to me sounds like this buzzword that we've been using for forever. Well, what feels like forever, which is smart buildings. How far down that smart building journey are you guys, and what does that actually look like tangibly? Because smart buildings to me still feels a little bit of a woolly word. I still don't really know what it means. So what does that bit mean for you in terms of ServiceNow and from a logistical, tangible point of view?
Yes, I think for us, it's where we can control. So that's probably where I'll start. So we obviously have our own solution, so we have to deploy that. So that's very much in control in a ServiceNow space.
Yeah.
And so we will build around that within our space, whether it be we're looking at the wayfinding solutions at the moment, obviously booking of the desks, reservations, all of that type of thing. But I think I've thought about this as well.
I just find it still a bit woolly.
Yeah,
You go to ISE, you go to Infocom, and they set up all the stands. It's smart building. But actually, when you start getting into it, you go, well, it's not really. It's just, unless somebody tells me otherwise. At this moment in time, I'm still thinking, is it smart, or is it actually just a management platform? Do you know what I mean? So I don't know. Maybe you guys can shed some light on that. What you got?
Yeah. Well, I'd say that's what we are too. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's kind of the issue. If because we normally go into a multi-tenanted building and quote unquote, they might have smart building features.
Yeah.
But I then I've got two systems already.
Yeah.
That I have to then educate the employee base on.
Yeah.
That's not what we want, right? And obviously, ServiceNow can come across all of them, but that already is a problem because even once again, me coming back to the people, educating them and making them kind of reducing the barriers to entry is important. So I think I'm talking about kind of maybe from the ServiceNow lens that we are very employee experience focused. So we're always on the front end, not necessarily the back end of things, but for me as a workplace person, I haven't necessarily seen massive amounts of great examples of it. It definitely exists, but I haven't leveraged that.
I'm hopeful that someone sees this podcast and, corrects me. And they're welcome to come on and speak to us about it. But I'm with you. I'm still a little bit unsure what that word means.
Yeah.
Smart.
Yeah. And I think I started looking after our technology division a year ago. And maybe, I can kind of look at it with fresh eyes, but a lot of maybe workplace teams don't actually have that expertise internally. So if you're a workplace person, our job is to go and implement that project, right? Construction wise.
Yeah.
And you might have the technology portion, but to then connect all the dots from the building technology system to your technology system to then who knows what else, that's a lot of knowledge, to try and make that journey. And companies like ServiceNow, we move at light speed. So to try and do that in 12 months is a big ask, as well as probably on top of your
day job on top of that.
Yeah. So I think a lot of workplace people, sort of from my lens, might not necessarily have that expertise or time to really spend on it. But coming back to the partner thing, that's where you could leverage a partner.
Yeah.
But then that's probably on one, in my opinion of what I think, kind of one lens. That could be your flaw, not the whole ecosystem.
And then see what it looks like from there.
Yeah, because we might have 3 buildings, 3 different building technologies that they have to be trained and educate.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. It's
Hi, just going to stop you quick 30 seconds. Hope you're enjoying the podcast so far. I'm going to take a quick 30 seconds of your time to say a lot of the content that we're delivering in these podcasts, we've actually written within a workplace guide. That guide can be found on our website. All of the content that we've got from the videos that we put together, from the guests that we interviewed, we put it into Word format, and that is found on our website. The links to that can be found below. Take a little look, download the workplace guide. It gives you everything you need to think about when it comes to your future workplace requirements. Link is below. Download and enjoy the rest of the podcast.
Yeah, I think it's a real rabbit hole which is still to be unpicked, really, in terms of that side of things. And your background is ISG, building stuff, and you're obviously really heavily involved in the technology side of things now. Now, historically, the technology integrators are really introduced around Reba Stage 4. Now that you're on this side of the fence, where you're specifically in charge of deployment of technology for end users, what's your opinion on bringing technology into Reba stages much earlier based on all the things you've already mentioned in this
Yeah.
20 minutes.
Yeah. I honestly think as much ramping time you can do, you have to do.
Yeah.
And I've done a lot of thinking since obviously the tech team came over to me, and I think that it has to be involved in everything that you do now.
Yeah.
Similar to like any, if you're deploying a technology in workplace, you will approach it like a project. People have done that for ages. But I think in terms of the design stage, because I've always said any construction project is a massive change catalyst. A massive change catalyst. We're doing one in Amsterdam, and they're going from more square feet to a bit less, right? So we have to implement some sort of technology solution to make it better or to book.
I'll measure it, right? Because, how do you know this work?
Yeah.
So it's all good and well saying we're going to go from 100,000 to 50,000. Here's the implementation of a new design, new meeting spaces, divisible space. So you've got flexibility on town halls. Okay, great. Has it worked?
Yeah.
How do you measure that?
Yeah. No, because I think that's what I mean. In that whole project timeline, you've got to think and have those considerations. But if for Amsterdam, we're already kind of chasing it, because we haven't kind of got around to where does it fit into that project schedule and how do we embed it in the change management. We know it's needed, but we just need to find at which point and to kind of hurry it up. Like I said, if you have a kind of a dedicated team, it's easier. But I know for a lot of workplace people out there, that doesn't exist. So they kind of try to catch up all the time.
You just sort the fires out a lot.
Just gives so much value.
Yeah.
Yeah, so much value. And, you can do I think there's a lot of great examples where you can design great space and people just use it and they haven't thought about all the powers in a great location. That's really what you want for technology too.
It needs to be invisible, right? So I think technology is deployed exceptionally well when people don't talk about it. And you know that it's a problem when it's a hot topic. Whereas actually it can be invisible and the room is just used. And it's used the way it's designed to be used. And you don't get the feedback. That to me is more, it's an indication more so of a successful deployment.
Yeah.
Because you don't want it to be an agenda point in a board meeting on a Monday.
No, exactly. And to your point around measuring success, that's obviously one of those pieces, isn't it? In terms of feedback that you get.
Yeah. And do you measure that at ServiceNow? How do you measure like end user feedback?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say we do a great job right now,
Right.
of that. But we're looking at deploying some various technologies coming up, and we have got robust feedback mechanisms in the app.
Yeah.
There's your usual, satisfaction, but we'll have, the usual metrics around adoption, kind of speed of use, and so on and so forth. But we're actually like going back to removing of barriers. We're interested actually how they use the technology. So we've got some stuff where you can do stuff before you come to the office, whether that reserve space or choose a space. But we're actually interested if they don't do any of that, they just rock up to the office and then just like either book it or use it. We can either tell obviously by sensors or physical check-in. So we're interested actually how the behavior is. And we're saying that there's one option if you feel so much that you wish to reserve something. But if you don't worry about it. You can just come in and book. So we're actually interested to see
that's cool.
How they
dynamic. What's the behavioral, what does that look like from a behavioral standpoint?
Yeah, because if you speak to people, they've got different opinions. Everyone's got an opinion. What they want to do to set up their day. Some of them are like, I need to know on a Sunday. I've booked my desk for 5 days.
Yeah.
Whereas some people are like, I have no clue what my day is tomorrow. I'm going to rock up.
Creatives.
Yeah. I'm going to rock up and choose something, or, I'm not too sure how my day wants to go. So I might go in a focus booth, or I might go to a big event space, So we're interested in that, is in how are they using it to that removing of the barrier thing. We don't want to say you have to reserve everything or you cannot commit.
Yeah, you need to try and remove the barriers, I think, like you say.
Yeah.
And what about challenges then? What would you say are the biggest challenges that you're facing at the moment in terms of, your role with deployment of technology, design and technology, ensuring you provide this space whereby people can behave in the way that you're explaining? What are the biggest challenges to that?
Yeah. So talking about probably the business, in EMEA, I see that the hybrid nature just being hard. We have people that go everywhere, different countries, or they're out seeing customers. So for the office in the coordination piece, I don't think we've solved for that too much yet, but we're trying to. And I think that's the biggest challenge. And that's kind of bridging the gap of enabling them to meet the people they want to meet, whether that be physically or virtually, right? And we've all got the video conferencing, but how do we make it easier again? So I think the hybrid nature is a big one. And I'd say in terms of the technology piece of what I found is the working together between IT, AV, workplace, and just that
Architects. Yeah.
architect or how to do it, because we're not the experts in that domain. We will be the main person that drives the project. And I think the thing that I've tried to do and my team tried to do is articulate the feedback from the business around how they interact with everything technology wise, because it doesn't tend to be about the workplace as much. It's the technology. And because we don't necessarily drive it, but you get the feedback,
Yeah.
we try to articulate that. So it's really trying to make sure that they're on the same future journey that we've planned for workplace, and they're hand in hand with that. And that's quite hard in a global company.
Yeah, it is. And it's certainly, it's a diverse challenge. It's not one answer. There's lots to it. Like you say, you've explained that. Your architects, your IT teams, your AV teams, there's loads of different voices involved in this. So I don't think there's one answer to the challenge.
No. And within that, you've got different things. So like I said, you've got the customer briefing team, you've got a team that looks after a different element, labs.
Yeah.
And then you've got another team. So it's joining those dots. But that's where I think I really try to connect people.
Yeah.
And I think you can really, I'm really trying with that aspect, but it's easier said than done in a large business.
Well, yeah, there's lots of bars for it.
Yeah. And when you get it, it's good. So like in a project is probably a great example of kind of a line in the sand. If you really dedicate time to make sure it really works, that can act as like a stepping stone to say that works super well. Why is that? And then you could either do it with a retrofit or you could do it with the next fit out.
Yeah.
Again,
that sounds to me a little bit like you need to know what good is. So we spoke a bit earlier about measurements, data, and understanding how do you know, right? So, and you just referred to it again a minute ago. When you've got a new fit out and it's worked particularly well, how do you know? You need some type of measurement device to be able to say, well, objectively, I can say that fit out worked exceptionally well, and here's the reasons why. So, and I'm not sure if, and again, I don't know the answer to this, but there has to be some type of measurement tool at the end of it all.
Or it's feedback. Yeah. So we do the normal post occupancy, but we do it kind of straight away. But we're chatting obviously about doing it 6 months, a year later, because it's different as it goes on. Yeah. Kind of the post move high to kind of figuring out there's some things that they don't like. Yeah. Obviously, utilization is one. The surveys that we use sporadically to kind of gain that feedback, but then it's the usage of what they're using.
Yeah.
And going back to budgeting, because I think a lot of us, especially now, it's very financially tight. Embedding in some budget to kind of tweak stuff is very important. So we've definitely been bitten by that because it's the first kind of thing to get on the chopping block when you're like, right, let's cut. So whether that's technology or something within the workplace, I think it's important to try and hold on to that, especially if you're experimenting with something different. I'm not saying we do that all the time, for sure not.
No, and like you say, budgets, when they get tight, it's easy to chop the AV, isn't it? And one of the challenges we had with a particular client that we work with was management of warranties and almost proactive support of items that were going out of warranty. And we look after their sites across Europe. And one of the questions they had of us was, your service proposition at that time is still quite reactive. And what that puts them into a difficult situation because they go, well, we don't know it's out of warranty until you come and do a service ticket on that piece of kit and you tell us it's out of warranty. Then we go, oh man, all of these rooms are out of warranty and we haven't set a budget for that. So then they go, so you get this spiral of, we haven't got the budget, but the rooms are out of warranty, they're starting to break, and we don't know they're out of warranty because it's still quite a reactive response. Yeah, it is. We've now developed an app which we call the Sportal, which is tried to be a bit more proactive in terms of management of warranties on that estate. So you track the whole warranty and that a year out, you then have the ability to say to the client, look, all of these rooms are going to be out of warranty. It might be worth going and get a budget approval now. So,
But that coming back to the partnering thing,
yeah.
ideal.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And it's not that's not rocket science.
It aims was
But
based off of that.
yeah,
You need to come up with this because
yeah.
at the moment, this is what we're having, but you need to come up. So we're okay, leave it with us. Went away, I came back, but sorry, God.
Yeah, no, I mean that's the kind of partnering that I think helps with, especially for a company like us who's incredibly agile, who kind of changes their mind every day. To have a partner that is willing to go on that journey and not to get too messed around, to try and help in it, especially the proactiveness, to go back to your point around, if the technology isn't working, it's the first thing to put somebody off.
Yeah.
So
Reputational damage.
nightmare. Yeah, big time. Both for the us as there, because my team tend to be the interface. DT and AV are not in all of our offices. So, we have an invested interest in making sure that AV works, as well as that to talk about kind of how we are hybrid in nature. They need that. Like if they're honestly put off, my utilization rates will take a hit because they're not going to come and use it.
Yeah. And then,
So it really is like really a joint effort in making sure,
absolutely.
that you kind of got a solid partner for AV or different types of things.
Yeah.
And also that it works for the end user, going back to that, understanding their feedback and passing it back to my AV guys.
Yeah. You could talk about that for hours, and quite often I did. My wife's like, Chris, you're boring me again. But we haven't got hours, unfortunately. So what, we mentioned challenges, hybrid working, that kind of scenario that you just spoke about a few minutes ago. What are the opportunities with that? So from our workplace perspective, your role, what are the opportunities with the next 3 years with what you're doing? What's the hot topic that you guys are looking at?
Oh my gosh, where do you start? I think the things that we're concentrating on is agility in everything, like our portfolio, our spaces. And, we don't have, I think everyone's kind of looking for that. And obviously landlords are also kind of seeing how do we solve for that problem as a tenant. And I think some of that agility, that we see in landlords is they're offering those types of spaces you can't, or a tenant isn't willing to buy. Podcast studio, for example, event space, gyms, things like this that are very attractive. And I think, for us, the agility of what we do is important. So I think that's a massive opportunity for us to try and solve, and also partners out there to work with us to solve. As both from a real estate strategy perspective, a workplace, whether that be furniture solutions, obviously technology solutions. I touched on it, the hybridness, right? Which I think does come back to technology and helping that collaboration piece. And I think the one that I'm most excited about, because I suppose I'm most passionate about, is the community side of it.
Yeah.
That is across, actually. How do I really generate attach kind of a community to a workplace brand is where I'm going after. I don't know. I don't know what it looks like.
I think it's an exceptional concept. As a guy who sporting background, military background, I get it, and I'm a business owner. Well, the metaphor that you're using here around that kind of sports community type feel is everything that I try and achieve within sport. Sometimes not very successfully, sometimes quite successfully. What you're talking about is absolutely...
Yeah, because I think, I don't know, like you've got the community, people may feel attached to a company as their community. But I think that's kind of becoming less and less. As people like jump jobs and, they don't feel as much commitment to the company as maybe what used to be. I think kind of having a community around something, and you've got to, I think in ServiceNow, I think I've got to find what gets people together. And I think I have a good idea, to then gravitate them around and attach that to the workplace brand, and less it's about the office and more about it's the people that
communicating from that.
Yes, totally makes sense. So it makes sense. I'm building it out.
Oh yeah, makes the theory in your mind is there.
Yeah. I'll come back in a couple of years and I've hopefully nailed it.
I'll give you a follow-up podcast.
Yeah.
30 years via Congress. What did you do?
Exactly. But I think even if I take a step outside of ServiceNow, if you attach maybe our experience in AV in office and then go and work with a brand to activate something. It could even, I don't know, something like that. Could be interesting.
Something in it.
Could be interesting.
So we always finish our pods with basically an underlying question, and that is, if you were an employee and when you're in charge of a new build or a retrofit build over the next 12 months, 18 months, what don't you know that you should know about that building? So if you're in charge of technology, the deployment of technology, we're looking for the hybrid, the importance of trying to make it hybrid, all the things we've spoken about in here, and you're in charge of that, you've got to offer your lease event coming in 12 months' time. What don't you know that you should know? What's the most important thing that people need to consider? Oh, it's another one of those impossible ones, isn't it?
Yeah. There's a fair few things, but I'm trying to think of a real, and I'm shooting from the hip, but I'd say going back to kind of the 2 points around community and technology, I think you would be understanding what is that building offering. And I think we can all see a lot of the new builds, the new builds that go up are just pre-let to their eyeballs, right? Because everyone wants that because of the different amenities and maybe the community that you could build around. But I think it would be understanding that mix and kind of what technology or amenities that they have within that space. Yeah, that's probably what I would say. I think that, but whether someone delivers upon that is another thing, within it. But
Yeah.
I'd also say maybe slight kind of off tangent, but I always think these things are good because the network and sharing of ideas, I think, can get so much better cross border because we do a lot of workplace things, but Spore AV is an AV company, right? Whereas that collaboration between DT, HR, all of those things can become a lot more cross-functional.
Yeah.
And I do think that is an opportunity to kind of share ideas or different insights.
And I think that's the point of this podcast, right? This podcast isn't a Spore podcast. It's not a ServiceNow podcast. The point of this is to try and articulate to people, this is why my role is important, and this is what it means in the bigger picture of a office move. You're a cultural fit for a company. This is what I'm doing. This is why it's important. So being able to articulate that through information sharing is the point of this. Yeah. So
Yeah, and I think just you kind of sparked an idea, but a large part within our projects of what we do when we're leading up to go live is talking about a story. So like adding in the AV, kind of the IT infrastructure into that story around how you can leverage it, how it's going to add value is what we really try to talk about.
Yeah.
And it's not like, oh, we have this type of cabling. It's like, this is what it will enable you to do in a context of how the employee uses. Yeah, that absolutely. That's the important thing. The storytelling is massively important. Very hard to do.
Yeah.
Very hard to do. But I think is incredibly important now to come back to probably my first point around how do we now add value to your business and show them that.
Oh, brilliant, mate. Last question, because again, we're on times here, but advice to business leaders. And what I mean by this is respect. We mentioned a couple of minutes ago around how budgets can get constrained, and we're living in a time when that's live, that's how it is. What advice would you give to budget holders when it comes to making technology-based decisions?
Yeah. So plan it in advance for sure.
Yeah.
Kind of go into that depreciation piece, right? And I'd also kind of have a partner that can advise you on it. Because I think in my experience, not just at ServiceNow, but other companies, you might just go to tender and it's like a one-time relationship. Whereas I think when we've done relationships that have lasted for a long time, they've really advised us in the long term. And not just for their benefit, like everyone has to make a profit, right? That really kind of said, I would be doing this.
Yeah.
And not kind of just doing it as a one-time relationship and things like that. So I think that I'd say to business partners, because you're probably going to be financially better off doing that.
Yeah.
Than just doing the one-off times.
That is very good advice.
Yeah. It's still going through your RFPs every couple of years, but I think where we've really seen value, both from a relationship perspective, financially, but also a delivery, is where we've had strong partners for a couple of years and really done some good stuff.
Brilliant. Yeah. That's super important and great advice. So thank you for that. Thank you. I know we're out of time a little bit, and apologies for like I say, I could have this conversation with you for ages. So we're out of time. How can people get hold of you if they have a requirement to get hold of you? And yeah, how can people find out some more?
Yeah, okay. Bring in the sales calls. I think LinkedIn's probably the best place to find me. And LinkedIn's probably the best place to find me, and happy to have a convo. Like I said, I'm always intrigued to see what other people are doing and kind of understanding where their business is going just to better inform myself. So yeah, always happy for have a quick conversation or a coffee. Yeah.
It was a pleasure, mate.
No, thank you for having me on. Enjoyed it.
On in and well done on your marathon time, by the way. Wow,
Thanks.
3:28. Stick that in there.
Been.
Well done, mate.
Hope you enjoyed the podcast. I certainly enjoyed conducting it and having an interview with that person. If you did enjoy it, again, have a little look at the workplace guide that we put together for you. Again, it's a Word formulated document. Link is in the description below. Everything that we talk about on these pods are all put together into little information booklets for you. And again, the information can be found in the links below. And if you did enjoy the podcast, feel free to check out this video here. I don't know what it is, but it's what YouTube tells you that you think you should enjoy next. So check that video out, and I look forward to seeing you on the next pod.